Pruning your tomatoes is a must. Or is it? Well, in certain circumstances, pruning your backyard or patio tomatoes can give you substantial gains in yield if done correctly. So let's take a deep dive today and look at the how and the why of pruning your tomatoes. Not all tomatoes are created equal. Each of the varieties of tomato plants that we grow are divided into two categories, and it's all based on their growth pattern. The two categories of tomatoes are determinate and indeterminate. The determinate or bush type tomatoes tend to grow to a determined size, obviously, and tend to set their fruit all at once. The indeterminate or vine tomatoes are those which will grow as long as their environment will let them and are really the focus of most of the pruning techniques that you see online. As a rule, I generally don't prune my determinate tomato varieties. Sure, of course in the spring I'll nip off the lower leaves during each phase of transplanting so that they don't get buried, and I'll remove any dead or damaged leaves or leaves that are touching the mulch, but I never touch the leading shoots. And suckers, they're not even really an issue with these guys. Early on, however, you can rip off some of the more obvious suckers. Suckers are the small adventitious stems that pop out of the leaf axil. As well, you can take off some of those lower leaf nodes that are getting shaded out anyways. But again, as a whole, I generally leave my determinate varieties alone. Those of you with longer growing seasons or a small amount or no frost days should definitely look at keeping your bushes more trim. So, to recap, determinate tomato varieties can be left alone and produce just fine. Don't touch the leading fruit or flower clusters, but you can remove any of the failing lower leaves or vigorous suckers from the lower 1/3 of the plant. Now, let's talk about the bad boys of gardening, indeterminate tomatoes. As the name implies, these guys will keep growing for as long as the weather and the climate allow. So if you live in an area or an environment that doesn't get frost and doesn't really get a winter, you can keep these guys growing for as long as you want to. So why do we prune? What's the point of pruning a vine tomato that's growing huge and lush and fine on its own without our intervention? We prune for two reasons. First, we want our tomato plants to produce fruit, not foliage. Obviously, it's the leaves that photosynthesize and give the plant energy and help it grow in the first place. But indeterminate plants will continuously grow and send out suckers and side shoots at nearly every leaf node and axil. At first, this is great because it produces a nice large plant that can support nice large fruit and lots of it. As time goes on, however, the foliage begins to grow over itself and the plant can produce more fruiting stems than it can even support. Left unchecked, indeterminate tomatoes will grow to infinity in all directions, but not necessarily producing more fruit. Just this fact alone is reason enough for responsible pruning. So we prune to maximize the energy and nutrition sent to existing fruit and fruiting stems, as well as the side benefits of increased airflow, less disease, easier watering, and just general easier maintenance. The second reason we prune our vine tomatoes is time, or more importantly, lack of time. If you live in an area that gets a winter or gets any frost days whatsoever, your vine tomatoes are on the clock. Producing fruit is a taxing process that takes energy. Fruit produced too late in the season will not only be incapable of ripening in time, it can also actually take energy away from the maturing fruit that's already on the plant, putting their production in jeopardy as well. By pruning any unnecessary suckers early on, as well as eliminating any flower buds that occur within 60 days of that first frost date in the fall, you can ensure that your vine tomatoes will be producing at maximum capacity. Indeterminate pruning isn't radically different from the pruning that we already did with the bush tomatoes, only it's a little more severe and we're a little more diligent with it. As before, we eliminate any of the lower shoots that are going to get shaded out anyways, or have the chance of touching the ground. I usually do this at the planting stage because it's just easier, and why make that plant waste any unnecessary energy? Again, just as important is to remove those suckers from the lower part of the plant. On vine tomatoes, these appear to be even more vigorous and prevalent. What may seem like an innocent cluster of lower flowers is actually a sucker that I left from the spring just for the purpose of filming this video. At over 3 feet long, this innocuous side shoot isn't even a team player. Like most indeterminate suckers, left alone, it actually begins to form its own adventitious root nodes. It does this as it prepares to exit from the plant. Suckers do indeed suck. This is the largest sucker I have ever seen. Suckers should never be left to get this big. You know you've left them too long when you have to use scissors to remove them. Actually, that's a pretty crude but effective rule. Hopefully this doesn't scare you guys out of growing indeterminate tomatoes. They really are a fantastic, mega producing crop. And as one of the crops that gardeners are actually active with in terms of maintenance, this is where the rewards of your labor really shine through. So let's recap. With indeterminates, again, remove the bottom suckers as they appear as early as possible. Also, you can remove as much as 1/3 of those bottom leaves and stems to increase airflow and prevent disease. And hey, one more bonus tip that I've noticed over the years of growing vine tomatoes, and I've actually never seen other gardeners mention, is that I've had greater success when removing suckers from the larger beefsteak or slicer type tomatoes all the way up to 1/2 or even 2/3 of the plant height. They really seem to react positively to this, and it doesn't affect my overall production. In fact, it seems to increase it. But for the cherry viners, I can still leave it at removing 1/3 of those bottom suckers simply because they take less energy overall to produce and ripen that fruit. Honestly, if you can identify and remove suckers early and often, that's over half the battle. As well, if you keep the bottom of that plant clean and clear, you're 99% of the way there with very little effort at all. You just have to keep in mind that we prune tomatoes with a purpose. We prune to keep the plants free of pests and disease, as well as to eliminate wasted energy so that these plants can focus on the fruit in hand. Tomatoes are the mega producers of our gardens, but without the proper maintenance and care, you could end up producing more foliage than fruit. So if you're growing vine tomatoes this summer, take a few minutes per plant to clean them up properly and set them up so that they can focus their energies on producing more of that fruit that we all love so much. Hey, thanks for watching, guys. If you're getting value in this and the other series that I'm doing on YouTube, hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons if you'd be so kind, and I'll see you in the next video.